Okay, ladies and gentlemen, take your seats, please. The Stewardship Council is called back to order. Okay, members, if you would please turn to file item number 8. File item number 8, please, in your agenda. And let us start this off. Let me see. Mr. Grindstaff, you want to start?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Our intent here is to come to the council and talk about a letter that we intend to send to the State Board by, I think, the 25th of April about their notice of preparation. They've been and spoken with us before. We asked Mark Bradley to prepare this staff report, and he will eventually prepare a letter, and I guess I should let Mark talk for a few minutes, and then I'll summarize where I would like to go and get feedback from you.
Okay.
Good morning. Chair Eisenberg, council members. My name is Mark Bradley. I'm a staff engineer with the Delta Stewardship Council. And this is item 8 on the agenda regarding a proposed update to the State Water Resources Control Board's Bay Delta plan. The state, the State Board is currently reviewing our 2006 version of this Bay Delta plan. It was first adopted in 1978. This constitutes the 4th update since then. And this update is scheduled for completion in 2013.
By the way, you provided us with a copy of the kind of summary notice as an addition, appendage to this item. So
that's correct.
On our table.
That's the notice of preparation that the State Water Board sent out, soliciting comments.
So this is a regulatory hearing?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And it has an environmental impact report?
Supplemental environmental document.
Supplemental. Okay.
Yeah. So this update began in 2009. There was a staff report that was done in 2009 that identified certain elements that should be addressed. This is being done in 2 phases. Phase 1, which began in 2009, is limited in scope. It just deals with South Delta salinity and the San Joaquin River flow objectives. Phase 2 is kind of everything else. And consistent with the elements discussed in the 5th staff draft, consistent with the elements discussed, I should say, in the State Board's 2009 staff draft, there are a number of items that they have committed to addressing. These include Delta flow objectives, export and inflow objectives, Delta cross-channel gate closure objectives, Sassoon Marsh objectives, potential new reverse flow objectives for the Old Middle River, potential new floodplain habitat flow objectives, potential changes to the monitoring and special studies program, and potential floodplain habitat. So these are elements that they have said they want to review and that they propose to review. Consistent with the elements discussed in our 5th staff draft Delta plan, the 2009 staff report, and the co-equal goals, we support this approach of these elements. In addition, we have asked that they also consider, or we will ask that they also consider, flows related to the location of the low salinity zone, often referred to as X2, a more natural flow regime for flows, salinity, and sediment, and applicable elements of recent TMDLs for certain contaminants. So, and staff commits to tracking progress on this and reporting back to the council on where we are as this develops. Comments are due to the Water Board on April 25th.
25th. Okay. Mr. Grindstaff.
Yeah, I want to add a couple of things. One of the things that I think is important to a lot of people is that this be done in a holistic way, and that was emphasized again with the report from the National Academies that we received officially today, and I think it's something that's consistent with the views of the council. So one of the things I'd like to emphasize in this letter is that we need to have a holistic approach as we move ahead so that it's integrated with the other things that are going on there. Second thing is people are very concerned that this be a very public process and that therefore there be workshops that address the concerns of how this is implemented. Now, some of this is driven by people's fears that the State Board will do something radical and extreme. And some of it's just so that there's a clear understanding of where they're going But in any event, we think that it's a wise thing to include in our letter to them that we recommend that they do those things. I know that the point that we have here about more natural flows is a touchy subject for many people because they feel that implies things that were in the criteria report in 2009 or 2010, excuse me. I don't think that's what's intended, and what I'd like to do is refer the State Board actually to this latest report from the National Academies, because I think it actually has a very good discussion of flows of the whole system, and it's something that I think is one of our responsibilities to make sure that decisions are based on best available science.
Okay. Questions, comments? Randy?
I've received some reaction from the public regarding this issue, this letter, and specifically the line item that delineates some of the issues that the council staff will be addressing in the draft response to the NOP. I spoke briefly with Mark before the meeting. I suspect that there's probably some folks in the audience who would like to address this.
Oh, yeah, we're going to...
But I think, Joe, your comments are go to some of the concerns that I've heard, that the letter doesn't state emphatically enough the need to be comprehensive and utilize the State Board's purview of issues and to not be just simply about flow. In addition, there's some concerns expressed about TMDLs and what authority the State Board has versus the regional boards, and then the final issue that I've heard is that staff has drafted a letter itemizing things that the council hasn't really discussed yet in detail. So just some feedback from the things
I appreciate that. I haven't seen a letter if there's one that's been drafted. I think what you have is the only product that we have.
Okay. Ms. Gray, then Don.
Thank you. First, let me thank you for your report. And Joe, thank you for what you did. I know staff spends a lot of time looking at issues and developing a response, but I know that there are two actions that your report, the NOP or whatever, would do. One is to monitor what the State Board does, and the other that you're recommending some concepts, I guess, in terms of flow. And I would like to hear from the public, but just one thought is, why not just respond in terms of monitoring what the State Board is doing and not include the other objective in terms of even commenting on flows? That's just an alternative. And again, I'd like to hear from the public. Also, there was a document, and I think you have this because we've talked last night about this, so that has some recommendation in terms of the process that you could include in your response. And I think you said that those are some things that you felt would be okay to recommend to the council or whatever. So I'd like you to look at that and see and inform the council about what these items are and see if that's some direction we can give to you that it would be okay to present a report like that. But that's just an alternative. Just monitor what the State Board is doing. And
I'm going to explain why I don't think just monitoring is okay.
Okay, and that's fine. And again, we'll just hear from the public. But I just wanted to throw that out there as an alternative, since there's so much controversy in terms of the natural flow versus other types of flows and the science behind it, which I understand is very controversial and so forth.
I agree.
Just wanted to offer that.
The council has taken, at least tentatively, through approval of moving forward with the draft Delta plan, a position that the State Board needs to move ahead. And one can argue about the language about that in setting flow standards. In addition to that, the legislature required that they move ahead with this process. And this agency is a responsible agency. And it is incumbent on us, in particular, to focus on best available science and to, I'll use the word, abdicate our responsibility to fulfill that role, I think, is wrong. I think as a council, even if positions are difficult to take, it's important for us to lay out what those issues are. And in this case, we are not proposing what the solution should be. We are saying that the state board should consider those issues. And I think Mark was pretty careful in how he drafted this to not say, we recommend you implement this, but to say you should consider these items as you move ahead. And I think it's entirely proper for the council to do that, even though sometimes I understand that that will be controversial, particularly when the language is just focused on flows and people feel that it's focused that way.
Just one other comment, and then I'll let that go. After today's session, and you may get direction from the council, and I assume that we probably won't make any decision on it today. And I know that the date for the deadline is April 25th, I believe.
It's the 25th,
Yeah,
so
and
before
I
the
think-
next council meeting.
And our next council meeting is on the 26th, but maybe there could be some process where you could, whatever direction we give you today, you could email the council and we can respond that way, unless we have another meeting. I don't know, but I know it's before our next meeting. So that's just another process by which we can make sure that our direction is given to you and you come back with something final to go to the state board.
I'll defer to our attorney, but I think we have to be careful of Bagley-Keene, although perhaps a committee.
Okay.
Ms. Marcus.
Yeah, I apologize for being late. As I understand it, people have an allergic reaction to the word flow in part of our process, and I just want to remind people, this is what the statute says, that they're supposed to consider that natural flow regime, but we can also write it in a couple of ways to make it clear. We've talked numerous times, particularly with Cliff, Dr. Goodwin's predecessor, about the importance of a more natural regime. It doesn't say all the water the fish might want. That's just a bookend. But that we find ways to have a more natural, something that mimics, not necessarily in quantity, but in in that hydrograph, the natural hydrograph. So I have sort of faith that you all can write it in a way that mirrors what we've talked about and mirrors what the statute says, but also puts whatever caveats on it are necessary to not have people go to that hyperbole fear place, which I understand people do. I'm not trying to critique it, but I do think it's a bit extreme at times and ridiculous. So I do think not that people are ridiculous to raise it, but that it's important to write it in a way that acknowledges reality and puts caveats in where people can't think we're saying something that's more extreme than what we're saying. I also think, and I don't want to make this a blanket statement, that I'm very comfortable having staff send comments as staff comments if we need to. I think we should comment. If we abdicate our responsibility to put in things and remind, whether it's any other agency or it's the state board, of what the statute requires, our job is to make sure people are doing what the statute requires. One may say, well, why do we need to tell them that? Well, we need to tell them that because everybody keeps forgetting what the statute requires. And the statute has language in it that mirrors other things in state law that people felt had to be in the statute because people ignore other parts of state law. And I just think it's very important for us to just be above the fold about what needs to be done for something to be realistic. Now, it's a little easier if you're looking at a draft letter for us to talk about the draft letter. I don't care if you want to notice a special meeting to do it if you feel you need to, or if you write something that has all the appropriate caveats on it so people can't take it to that extreme, because we know people do have to be defensive about what they're afraid of on all sides of this issue. I'm not picking on one set of stakeholders. I've seen them all do it on this one. Mm-hmm. But there are times in listening to the comments we've had on our plan where I have felt that someone's overreacting to something, but then when I sat down and talked to them, I could see why they were afraid, because we didn't put enough caveats on it. So I see this as eminently doable I wouldn't want us to not do it, because I think then we're belying the whole point of us being here, which is to be a reasonable, out in public, transparent entity focused on the implementation of that statute. So, again, I guess the devil's in the details, but I have comfort that you can do it if we give you enough guidance here about what we're worried about. But if somebody says, don't say natural flow at all, then I'm like, oh, forget it. What's the point of us being here? That's clearly what the fish need. But they don't necessarily need all of it.
Right.
So.
Okay, Don?
Yeah, just a brief comment, and we did receive a letter that was at our response this morning from a number of the folks representing water entities throughout California. And I think some of the words, and Randy touched on some of them that have come to mind, and they may be subject to some interpretation, but obviously I think having transparency, which this council certainly has worked very hard at, is making sure that this body, the water board, and its review, that we encourage the same thing. They may have their own processes, and certainly they have to adhere to law relative to scoping and notices of preparation and such. But I think that people are much better served in the long run, and it may be extra effort than what they're used to doing. But I think we ought to encourage that as a part of our letter to them, and again, if they adhere to their normal processes, then maybe they comply with the law. But I think this is a big enough issue from what we've heard from folks, and I think in various other discussions before this council, and certainly in other settings, that it's important that they spend some time beyond just sending out the notice and send your comments in, and then we go back and do our work in the kitchen, and then we come out and we put that out for review. So I think we need to encourage that. And another word that's used quite a bit, but I think it's important, and it's something that I think this council, and certainly Joe and his staff and others, have worked very hard at in preparing the different iterations of the draft Delta plan, and that is to look at a comprehensive approach that takes into account a multitude of factors, recognizing that when you talk about flows or natural flow regimes or unimpaired flows, those are all words that people can you draw the swords very quickly about and be on either side of the line. But I think it's important that if they're taking this on, that comprehensive analysis and looking at factors that might just be the ones that they would, if they were going to do this in a different watershed or a different part, in a much smaller setting. This is a big deal. It's a big deal anyway, wherever it's at. But so I think it's important that and we ought to, as a part of our anything that we would correspond to, really outline that we think that analysis, recognizing there's a time frame here that that everybody is to be working against, but nonetheless that in that consideration, that comprehensive analysis and consideration. But part of that would be if they went out and did some sessions and heard from folks, just as we do in this setting and other settings, and they'd get a better sense of that. And they may, the board and their staff may assume they know all the different points, but I would say that I think this is a dynamic enough issue and an important enough issue from lots of different perspectives that as a part of our communication, I think we need to be very strong on those points, and it doesn't take sides, but I think it really puts it out there that, do the analysis, recognize you're going to be laboring under some difficult time frames, and do it in a way that takes into account a variety of factors, recognizing that obviously there's, at the end of the day, they're going to be, shooting towards developing objectives and forward flows and the various components of that. So.
Okay.